Welcome to this explainer. All right, I want you to picture a scenario. And hey, it might feel a little too familiar right now. You've made the hard choice. You are being incredibly strong, you haven't reached out to your ex, and you're holding the line. But let's be totally honest with ourselves here. Secretly, you might be sitting there staring at a completely silent phone, just agonizing over what that silence actually means. You're quiet on the outside, but inside, your mind is incredibly loud. Okay, let's dive into this because it is so easy to just assume that because you're maintaining no contact, you are automatically moving forward, right? We kind of tend to equate quiet with progress. But as we'll see from the psychological frameworks and data provided in our sources today, that assumption might actually be the exact thing keeping you stuck. So that brings us to part one, the myth of silence, and exactly why no contact is not a magic fix. If you spend literally any time online looking for breakup advice, you are going to hit this massive, pervasive myth that going no contact will magically fix your relationship. But here is a stark realization straight from the research. Silence does not equal progress. We really need to let that land heavily for a second. See, silence is never just a neutral state. People think doing nothing means nothing is happening, but actually, silence is always actively doing something to your mind. Honestly, it often creates this absolute void, where your brain just starts projecting potential that simply isn't there, slowly putting your ex on a pedestal while you do absolutely nothing but wait. It really comes down to this. Silence can settle your nervous system, or it can completely suspend you in hope. And wow, this is a massive revelation for anyone going through a breakup. The exact same behavior, going no contact, can actually result in two completely opposite psychological outcomes. One outcome brings you genuine relief and clarity, while the other just traps you in an agonizing state of limbo. Which leads us to section 2, the two paths of no contact. Basically, the fork in the road of your recovery. And this brilliantly illustrates how engaging in no contact places you at a highly critical psychological crossroads. There are two very distinct paths here. Path A is healing. This is where you are using silence for actual nervous system regulation and self-protection. But then there's Path B, limo. This is where silence is secretly being used as a manipulation tactic, a covert way to try and trigger an ex's regret or force them to miss you. So how do you know which path you're actually on? Well, let's look at the data. Here are the definitive signs that prove you are actually on Path A, the path of healing. No contact is working if you're genuinely experiencing decreased anxiety. You've actively stopped checking their social media. You've removed those triggering events from your daily routine. You've broken those old, exhausting patterns of constantly needing their validation, and you just feel a vastly reduced urgency to try and fix things right this second. If this describes you, awesome. The silence is doing its job. But let's be deeply honest with ourselves here. What if it's failing? You might think you're just giving them space, but consider these signs. Are you still monitoring them from afar? Are you secretly expecting some sort of sign from the universe or from them? Are you actively hoping they regret the breakup? And worst of all, have you hit pause on your own life and goals, basically just waiting around to see if they are finally processing their feelings? Look, if you're doing this, you aren't giving space. You are literally just freezing your own life and eroding your chances of actually learning from this experience. And that brings us right into section 3. Waiting versus true boundaries, and the psychological trap of giving them space. Understanding the massive difference between waiting around and actually setting a boundary is absolutely the most crucial psychological pivot we'll cover today. See, waiting is actually a validation strategy that just keeps hope alive. It allows the other person to remain entirely in control while you helplessly look for proof that you matter to them. And this is especially true when you're dealing with an ex who has an avoidant attachment style, someone who instinctively pulls away from emotional closeness. In that dynamic, waiting can so easily disguise itself as a healthy boundary. You tell yourself, oh, I'm just respecting their space. But deep down, it's really just a desperate search for reassurance. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we contrast that with a true boundary. A boundary is a firm, unwavering decision about what you will and will not accept in your life, and it is entirely independent of what the other person does. Seriously, let that sink in. It does not depend on whether your ex reaches out today, tomorrow, or literally never. A boundary is about you protecting you. I want you to really let this powerful quote sink in. Stop organizing your nervous system around their absence. You have got to stop letting an empty space dictate your daily anxiety, your schedule, and your overall well-being. Their absence shouldn't be the loudest, most controlling thing in your room. So let's move into our final chapter, section 4, reclaiming your agency, shifting from passive waiting to active clarity. So the crucial point is it's time to shift our tone from exposing the pain to actually empowering you. To do this, we need to drastically reframe your internal monologue. We have to move you away from the completely useless, frankly exhausting question of, will they reach out? And ask this empowering alternative instead. What does this moment require of me? That is how agency returns, folks. That is how you stop being a passive passenger in your own post-breakup experience. Let's move to and see how this builds into a practical, actionable framework for regaining control. Step 1, calm your nervous system. Step 2, reprogram your attachment style. Step 3, expose yourself to real-life data. Remember, breaking contact shouldn't mean you just forget how to be assertive. It actually means you stop hiding in the silence and you start actively engaging with your own life again. Because ultimately, we don't care about hope. Hope just keeps you suspended. What we need is clarity. I want to remind you that no contact itself is not the solution to your breakup. Clarity, gained through real-life data and actually moving forward, that is the solution. Only with that clarity can you finally make an empowered decision about whether to move on permanently or maybe attempt to repair the relationship, but from a place of real strength. So I will leave you with this final thought to really ponder today. Are you going to keep waiting around for a sign, or are you ready to decide? Are you truly reclaiming your narrative, or are you just hitting pause on your life and hiding in the silence? The architecture of your recovery is completely in your hands now. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I genuinely hope this helps you find your clarity.